Hey guys, I'm Anae.
Hi, I'm Karime.
And I'm Elizabeth. And we're from the Golden State Readers, a group of students across California fighting to put an end to book bans.
Today we are here with author Elana K. Arnold to discuss book bans and her experience as an author.
Hello, thank you so much for having me.
Okay, we're so excited for you to be here. Would you mind introducing yourself?
Sure. So I am Elana K. Arnold. I write books for and about children and teens, everything from picture books through upper YA. It has crossover readership in the adult world. Um, and unfortunately, I've seen a number of my books challenged, banned, and removed from collections all across the country over the past couple of years.
So, to get started, what was the moment that you realized that you loved to write and storytell?
Oh gosh, well, I can't think of a moment. So I am an autistic person who was undiagnosed as a kid and had no luck making friends, although I desperately wanted them. People were my very favorite animal, and I love all the animals of the world. And I just couldn't figure out people. I was that kid, everyone has probably a couple of you might have been that kid who didn't know how to get in with the people. And but books, you could tell what the people were thinking. I used to wish that people would walk around with bubbles over their heads saying what they were thinking and what they wanted, because then I could do those things, which is another layer of problematic. But it was true, and in books, you heard characters say what they thought. So I just thought books were the best. They kept me company. They explained people in the world to me. And I just always thought that the only thing better than reading could be writing. And so I was writing from a very young age. I took some breaks here and there, but yeah, I think my identity as a writer is pretty lifelong.
Do you have a book in particular that has shaped your life?
Well, I'm a child of the 80s, and so the books that shaped my life as a, mostly cisgendered, mostly straight white girl were Anne of Green Gables and Harriet the Spy. I think were two big ones. Harriet was someone who, like me, really wanted to understand people. And she was a lot more adventuresome than I was. So she would get into adventures that I never would in real life. But I loved how important her work was to her, that writing was her work and spying was her work, even from an early age. And Anne of Green Gables, I just loved the wonder with which she came to the world. And I think that's something that I have also, is that I find the world to be deeply interesting at all moments. And I think probably all children think the world is deeply interesting. And I think that's one of the things that makes people artists or writers or people who continue to think the world is deeply interesting even after childhood. Those are two of my absolute most foundational works, I think.
Mentioning your new book that came out in October, Blood Years,
Yeah.
we're so curious of how we know it carries a lot of history with your grandmother,
Yeah.
and how it also represents millions of people. And we were curious how you, as the author, prepared for the Blood Years.
Oh, I have it right here. I'll just show you the cover. This is the Blood Years. It's a glare. It is my first work of historical fiction. It is, as you said, based on my grandmother's teenage years in Chernovitz, Romania, before and during the Holocaust. And it was a book that's taken me more than 10 years to write. Yeah, I mean, I grew up with these stories that my grandmother told me, and then she told them to me cyclically over and over again with more and more detail as I asked for more information, which I think is such a great way to share difficult information with, or any information with kids, is you give them what they're asking for, you answer them honestly, and then you wait and see if they ask follow-up questions. And that's what she did with me. And but this book also was hugely deeply researched. It was very important to me not to make stuff up about the Holocaust, not to sensationalize truly terrible things. And so whenever I was unable to use information from my grandmother's life because I didn't know, I found other historically relevant opportunities from the deep research I did, and wove those through my book. So I think of it as sort of a mosaic of the Chernovitzers and the Jews of Greater Eastern Europe. Everything in it happened to someone, either my grandmother, or at least all the war events did, all the war and the Holocaust related events, the personal stuff, the interrelational, stuff between the sisters and the mother. That's all. I guess that's more where the fiction comes in.
What would you say your writing process is like?
Such a good question, because I would love to know the answer. I think I go through, like all writers, I go through periods where I think I'll never write again, and I don't know how to write, and I don't know how I ever wrote the things I did write. The only difference is that now I can look back and say, well, I did finish that other thing. So chances are I'll finish this next thing. So I think that's the one thing that makes me different than a younger version of me, is that I despaired before that I would never finish. And now I have proof of concept. So that's very helpful, which I think is a wonderful reason why you should finish things, even if they're not very good. Like, it gives you proof of concept. I finished, I can finish again, and also gives you something to revise. But I spend a lot of time, I try to spend a lot of time not writing when I first feel like the glimmer, like I just started getting a glimmer of an idea a couple of days ago, a new idea. And I try not to look right at it. I try to just ask myself a lot of sort of dreamy, like, I wonder and what if questions. And I think you kind of have to sort of romance the idea, sort of make room for it to sort of try to get you interested in it. It's and then once I've decided this is the project I'm going to work on, there's a long amount of research that I do, usually woven throughout the writing process. I usually can't wait to start writing. So I'll start writing, but I will also research at the same time. And I go back and forth between writing and researching. I would say all of my books are deeply researched. And there's always more to learn about the world. And whenever I feel like I'm stuck or I have writer's block, or whatever you want to call it, the answer for me to something else I've learned is always more research. I can always do more research about something. When I was writing A Boy Called Bat, I did more research about skunk husbandry. When I was writing Damsel, I did more research about what would people drink for a hot drink in the medieval world. Did they have coffee? No, they didn't have coffee. Well, what did they drink? There's just and whatever I find inevitably works in my current work. So the other thing I would say that I've learned is that there is no one true path to creating a book. Basically, anything that washes past you and over you can be taken and used in your work that you're working on right now. And you might not know why or how it fits, but if you put it in there, the back of your brain will find ways to sort of to tuck it in and make it relevant. So the older I get, the more I trust in the magic of writing, even though I don't believe in a magic at all. It's kind of funny. You don't have to believe in it for it to occur. Yes. And there's a long period of revision. Every book is a, I don't believe in like shitty first drafts, like people say. I think you should put care into all of your work, and it's okay to go slow. And the more time you allow yourself to sort of create, the better stuff you'll have to revise. But revision is always a major part of my work. The Blood Years is the result of at least 7 full, complete drafts.
Oh, that's insane.
That's a lot of work. Yeah. This book, I don't think I would have finished if it hadn't already been sold. Usually I finish a book and then I sell it. But this book I sold on 51st pages with an editor I'd already been working with for a long time. And had I not already been paid half of the advance, I don't think I would have finished it. It was so hard. I didn't think I could do it. There was so much despair. But I'm so proud of it. So I'm grateful to my editor and my editing team. That's the other thing, is that no one makes a book alone. Like I used to, when I was a kid or a teen, I would look at a finished book and I'd be full of despair because I would think, oh, I could never do that. And now I'm like, yes, you were right. I couldn't have ever done that. No one does. I write the story, but then, I have writer friends who ask me great questions. And, as you become a professional writer, you have an editor who asks you even more challenging questions. And you have a design team who decides what the book looks like. So I suppose if you're a young person who wants to write, your job is to stay curious and to stay interested in the world and to say a lot of I wonders and to play and to try not to shame yourself. Shame is it's the tool of the oppressor. So it's best not to wield it at yourself.
It's really great to hear about your writing process. And then I know you touched on the Blood Years and where you got that inspiration from because it's historical fiction. But with a lot of your other books that are more like realistic fiction, where do you get your inspiration from? Do you pull from your own experiences? Like, how does that work?
Now that I've written a number of books, I can see that there's some sort of a math equation to where my work comes from. I'd say it's 1/3 me. Like things I've experienced personally, things I've felt, things I've worried about, my own shames and desires and curiosities. And then it's 1/3 things outside of me. So like books I've interacted with or stories I've seen or something someone told me about their life, plus 1/3 sort of what if, which is sort of like, I don't know where it came from. It's like, well, what if I took this and this, then what? And this third piece sort of comes in. So for like What Girls Are Made Of, which I know you said you were reading, a lot of the me is the sort of shameful obsession over a boy and wanting to be wanted so desperately. And my relationship with animals and my deep love of animals, that's all me. And the not taking care of my own body. And then learning to love, not even just to love my body, but to physically care for it, to feed it, to make sure I have warm socks. No one did that for me when I was little. And so it was something I had to learn. The 1/3 outside of me would be like, I learned the research, I started researching these slashed beauties, these, what's the other word for them? I can't remember what they're called now. The wax figures, the anatomical Venuses that are in that book. And then the what if is like, well, I also had heard of these like things called real dolls, which are these like, human sized sex dolls that look like corpses, which to me, they like click together, the sex doll that I had heard of, plus these anatomical Venuses, which were these things made to study the human body because real corpses, rot, but they were made to look so fairy tale like and beautiful. So the fairy taleness and all my knowledge about fairy tales mixed in. And then I had this doll, it was called a growing up skipper doll when I was a kid. You could twist its arm and it grew breasts. I wish I held on to it. Things worth a fortune now. They pulled it almost immediately. I think my grandmother got it at a yard sale, but it seemed too like an anatomical Venus. And this idea of the body, like both being yours, but also being this thing that doesn't belong to you, that's buildable and formable, and that someone else could say, well, what if it had this and this instead? And just that idea of body and ownership, all those things mixed together. See, there's the me, my experience with the growing up skull in my own body, the thing outside of me, which is these anatomical Venuses that I'd study, and then the what if, what if I put them together into a book? How do they fit together? A lot of it is sort of just like trusting that the back of your brain is interesting. And that if you throw a bunch of interesting things together and let it sort of sit together, it'll turn into an interesting stew. And the best way to have an interesting back of the brain is to be interested and to just continue learning. Just everything you put into you becomes a resource that will later, your brain is doing things with it in a way only your brain can. It's like adding soil food to the soil. I'm not a gardener, but whatever, and it'll react differently in that garden based on the environment you're in, and how much water there is available and how much sunlight there is and what the weather is like. And you are all of those things, right? So if one of you put the anatomical Venuses in your brain, you're going to become something different is going to come up. So anyway, it's all the same. It's all the same work. It's all being interested in the world and seeing how those things combine.
I love hearing that so much because I recently read What Girls Were Made Of, and like that shows through so much. Like I was just so engrossed in the novel because I can just feel the like interest and like inspiration through. And I just wish I had that book. I had known of that book in early high school because it is the most relatable book I've read to my situation. And I
Oh,
haven't read any other
thank
book
you.
like I wish
I'm
I
so
knew
glad you said that.
the book. Yeah, no, it's really I'm reading it being like, oh, I wish I had this earlier, but I'm glad I have it now. Better now than never.
I'm
But
glad too. Thank you.
yeah, but also knowing that it comes partially from your own experiences, why are stories like the ones you write important?
I just genuinely don't think my job is to teach lessons. I think my job is to muck about and be vulnerable, and to make art. So I think stories like mine are important because I'm a human being and human beings are important. So I think part of the problem we get in with the book banning conversation is that we kind of want to elevate books for about children or teens to be sort of propaganda for teaching good lessons. And that opens us up to this idea of them being propaganda to teach bad lessons, which sort of this other group sort of, screams and yells about. And I think the problem is that books aren't propaganda. Books are art. And art can't be pornography because it has artistic merit. Of course, a little bit of a circular question, but that's how I think about it. And so I think I also think, yes, it's important that everyone sees themselves in books. But I think that the bigger and most important job is for a variety of voices to have the ability to feel that they are people who are worthy, that everyone should feel worthy of making art, and that everyone feels that they have stories that are worth sharing and being heard. And then people make the most interesting art they know how, and then they learn, and then they make more interesting art. And if my book can spur others to do that in their own head and with their own work, then I feel very lucky to get to be part of that sort of life cycle of books being created, and whatever books you are going to create. Because now What Girls Are Made Of, it's part of your stew, it's in there, and it's going to murk around, and it's going to fester, and it's going to grow little green tendrils in your brain, and you're going to see other connections with other things that I would never have access to. And who knows, to see in 10 years or in 5 years or in 2 years or in 100 years, like where that goes. That's pretty cool.
I recently saw your interview with Arrow Collins and how you mentioned how symbolic it was to see your grandmother through your family and how you carry her experience to this book. I was wondering, what were your hopes for this book? Like, how do you wish your book to reach people?
Well, first of all, with The Blood Years, I just really hoped that I did right by my grandmother's story, and that I bore witness to her story and to the story of the Chernobytzers who suffered and those who perished in the greater sort of Eastern European Jewry of my family and people beyond my family. That was very important to me. I think I did a good job. I feel proud. I think my Nana would be proud of me. And also to create something that my kids and my nephews and nieces and nibblings and my siblings can be proud of. So we're a very small family. Both of my grandparents were Holocaust survivors, and most of their families were murdered. And when they came here, they only had one kid. And that kid had the four of us. And so there's just the four siblings. Now everyone above us is dead. And so there's just the four of us and our 5 progeny. So it's not a very big family. So I wanted to do something personally that felt meaningful. And I feel like I did a good job. As far as what I hope for the book, I mean, I want everything for this book. I want it to win every award. I want everyone to read it. I want it to be in every school and every library and every home bookshelf. I want all the things from my book. I won't get all of them. I already didn't win the National Book Award. Another wonderful book did. So, one does not get everything one wants. But there you go. I would love sometimes people say to me, and it's not lost on me that we have 3 very lovely female presenting people on this call, but people say that, every girl should read, What Girls Are Made Of. All the girls should read Damsel. And I want to shake my fist. Like, no, everyone should read, books about a girl's experience are not books just for girls. They are for the world. And so books about teenagers are not just for teenagers either. It's how lovely for adults to read these experiences and to remember and reconnect and have perhaps maybe more empathy or just at least enjoyment from the pleasure of getting to read a book about a situation that is behind them. So I want everyone to read. This is my dog Phoebe. She's going to need help getting up because she's got a bad hip. There she goes. I want everyone to read my book, and I would love it to get all the accolades. And that is something I would encourage other younger writers coming up to say and to say about their own work, is that they're proud of it and that they want to see all the best for it. Because you work hard on something for 10 years. Gosh, one would hope that it is something that I would like to see go very far.
So inspirational.
Now, kind of getting on to the topic of book bans. When we found out about book bans, we were outraged, which started our drive to start the Golden State Readers. So, do you remember a moment where you realized the true severity of the book ban issue?
Yeah. So first of all, let's spend a few moments. One thing I most recently learned, it was through a PEN event actually, was that the current book banning problem actually started with anti-CRT movements during COVID. There was this whole don't teach critical race theory in school thing, which you could do a whole bunch of research. No one's teaching critical race theory in school. It's a legal term. It's not being taught in middle school or high school or whatever. They're just telling the true history of American racism in schools, which is what they really don't want to talk about. I'm probably not telling any of you something you don't know, but that actually was sort of the first thing. And then from there, the book banning, sort of many of the books that get banned are books that feature Black or other people of color, although Black characters most of all, and Black authors most of all, and LGBTQIA authors and themes. my books, which tend to be, you know, I guess fiercely feminist, also fall under attack, largely because they have sex in them, or questions about sexuality, or questions just about bodies. You know, like Red Hood, there's menstruation in it, and it becomes sort of a power for one of the characters, and which I think is really clever and cool, but people think is really gross. But I think really clever and cool and really gross often go together. And being in a human body is gross. It's also really clever and cool. I mean, it's all of the things. So I learned about that recently, about how close that connection was, and how the desire to keep sort of discussions about American racism out of classrooms, you know, was the first wave of what we see now is book banning. Also, I have Google alerts set up for some of my books. And so I started to get these Google alerts, like, oh, someone's talking about my book. And then I would realize, oh, no, this is an article about my book being pulled out of a school. So I started getting a lot of those. I get those every day now, sometimes several times a day. I'll get a Google alert about one of my books being challenged or banned. And I started getting really terrible hate mail from people, just really, you know, things telling me to kill myself and things like that, which is terrible, obviously. And so I guess it's something I keep learning about again and again and again. I don't remember I know it was during the pandemic, I think, is when I first started being aware of my books being put onto lists. And then what's interesting is that once you're sort of known as sort of an author whose books they want to remove, I started seeing sort of very chilling things. Like I saw a list of books that were being considered to be pulled. And one of my books, it's a middle grade novel called The House That Wasn't There. It's a super charming, lovely book with gentle magic in it. Someone had read it and put on the list, not a problematic book, but by a problematic author. So this idea that just a book by me is now, that I myself am a problematic person. And it's like, you know, things never really go well, you know, when you see your people's names go on lists, you know. I mean, as Jews, you know, that's never a good sign when the names are on a list. So it's chilling for sure.
Yeah, wow, that's really shocking, especially in my mind, because if someone's old enough to experience the things you're writing about, then why shouldn't they be able to read about it? And the whole just problematic author is just crazy to me. That's beyond.
It's very strange. Yeah. And I mean, I know some of my books are uncomfortable and gross. And it's like, but the wonderful thing is the books are such a perfect place to practice consent. You don't like it, you feel uncomfortable, how powerful. You can close it and put it down and walk away. Like that is a moment of positive consent practice right there.
I love that. I love that point of view. And then so I also know that some officials will ban books without even reading a page, or excerpts will just get circulated. How does that feel as an author of those books and someone who wrote those excerpts, but you know so much more from where it came from? How does that feel?
Yeah, it is interesting to have one's words sort of weaponized against oneself in that way. Sometimes it's even just an image out of some graphic novels. I've seen people hold up posters with, you know, like an image from, you know, a panel from genderqueer. They'll hold it up at meetings and things. And pornography. I mean, it feels kind of not surprising. I do think we live in a time where, on sort of all sides of the spectrum, people maybe aren't taking enough time to say, wait a minute, let me learn more. Let me make sure I understand the whole issue before I, you know, make a loud statement. I think I've even myself, like, very quickly have wanted to know people to know that I'm on the right side, you know, and so I'll repost something with a loud shame on them or whatever, and not have actually read the whole thing myself. So I'm guilty of it too. But I do think it speaks to the time and space we're in, that we're so interested in drawing lines and taking sides. I mean, of course, I think, you know, the book banners are terrible and on them. But I think there's an opportunity for me to look at myself too and say, okay, well, in what ways do I need to slow down and be a more responsible sharer of information when it comes to what I post or what I put into the world, not from a fictional perspective, but from a political perspective. And how can I be as responsible with media and as careful with language as I can be? Because, like, pornography is a real thing. It has a real meaning. And we degrade language when we allow ourselves to use words because of the way they make us feel, as opposed to what they actually are. And as someone who loves language so much, I want to make sure that I'm using the language I want to be using in the way I want to use it carefully, and not just sort of as a gut instinct response because I want to be seen a certain way or I want to feel a certain way. I know I went off topic there, but I do that, and I apologize. But yeah, I don't like it. That's the short answer.
Yeah. So how do you think, or how do you feel people like us, the Golden State readers, are like trying to step up and like taking the issue of book bans into our own hands? Or like, how do you think us or the upcoming generation can necessarily help with bringing more awareness with sense?
Oh, I think what you're doing is fantastic. I also think it's a real bummer that young people should have to defend their rights to have access to books. Like, you shouldn't have to do that. You should be just consuming the media and the literature you want to consume, and you should be the freest generation. And you should have the most, and in some ways you have the internet, right? So, I mean, that gives you its own limitations, but you do have access to more information than other generations, especially if you're privileged enough to have computers and a working internet connection, and adults who, share information with you. I also feel like it's kind of, unfortunately, always the job of the youth to see clearly the faults of their elders and take stands. So, I guess for better or for worse, this is one of your generation's fights. And I mean, it's mine too, yes, and also ours. But yeah, you guys, you're going to have to defend the things that you think are important. And if you think, like your group does, that you have a right, a First Amendment right, to access to free speech, then you need to defend it. I think a lot of this comes down to people not thinking of children or teens as whole people. Adults tend to think of children as appendages, as objects, as possessions. And even more so, female, cisgendered and female bodies have historically been objects of possession. And it's not really surprising that your rights are not seen as your rights, but rather as the rights of other people to make about your body. I mean, you see this all across the political spectrum, people making decisions about your body and what you have the right to do with your body, and your brain and your eyes and your ears are your body too. So it's all part of the same movement to restrict your autonomy.
Yeah, this issue is one that I could talk about for hours. So we started the Golden State Readers to help combat this issue. How do you suggest that the viewers at home help combat this issue as well?
I think probably one of the most important things people can do is stay very aware of what's happening as close to home as possible. This is, I think, a battle that has to be fought on a million fronts. So what's happening in your school? Go talk to your school librarian. Say, have there been challenges to any books in our library? What's going on here? Don't think that because you live in California, it's not happening. I just spoke up not too long ago in Huntington Beach, where research that's bizarre. It's a whole conversation. But there have been challenges. I just showed my books alone in several different districts here in California. So go ask your librarian. Show up at school board meetings if you're interested. They're boring, but you'll probably find out, hey, wait a minute, they're making all sorts of decisions about me without my consent at this place, that maybe some of it have to do about books and some others have to do about other things. Talk to other readers. When you're looking to support books that are challenged or banned, I know a lot of times it feels so good to people to buy the one book that everyone hears about. And sure, great. I love Mouse. Mouse is one of the most important books in my life. It's a graphic novel about the Holocaust. It's absolutely helped me understand my father and his father so well, because it's about Polish Jews who had a very similar relationship. But I mean, that book's going to do okay, look for smaller local authors like you have done, whose books maybe are just going to quietly disappear from shelves. Ask your library to carry books. You can go to your public library with a list of books that they don't have, and I request that they purchase them. They will. They have to, I think, if they have the funds, and if if residents want books in the collection, they have to carry them. I've heard from some librarians that they don't have a physical copy of my book Red Hood in the library because they're worried about bans, and so they have it as available as an audiobook, but not as a, so someone went in and requested that they buy a physical copy, and then they had to. So yeah, pay attention and ask lots of questions and be really curious about, you know, about what's happening in your, you know, in your own little neighborhoods, and meet other people like yourselves as you have done and form coalitions. It's a long fight. It's not going away anytime soon.
Yeah, I know it definitely feels much more, we feel much more powerful and inspired to keep fighting now that we have the Golden State Readers, and it's not just each of our little small groups. So yeah.
I think that's awesome. And write stories. Yeah, write about the things that, you know, frighten, compel, disgust, titillate, and concern you. Each of you is just, you know, a whole person with so many things to say. And if you don't have anything to say yet, just keep filling up that garden, and don't worry about it. It'll come.
That's awesome. And that kind of just leads us into this next question of, do you have any words or any advice or words of inspiration for young readers and writers?
Yeah, just read, pay attention to stories, ask people lots of questions about themselves, try to look up and around, go outside, ask a lot of I wonder questions about yourself. Try not to shame yourself. I spent a lot of years shaming myself for not writing enough. My mother used to say, well, writers write every day. Are you writing every day? And I would feel so much shame because I didn't write every day. And then one day I realized, what the heck does she know? She's not a writer. How does she know that writers write every day? It's not even true. Like, some writers write every day. I think one thing all writers do every day is they pay attention and that they're interested. If they, you know, whatever it is you're interested in, become more interested in it. If you're interested in something that other people think is gross or weird, like, don't let that deter you. Dig in deeper, you know. The world is fascinating. And even if you never write a word or make a piece of art, if you can fall back in love or continue to be in love with the world, you're going to have a more interesting human experience, which is itself the highest form of art, I think. Even if it doesn't leave footprints, you know, necessarily as clearly as a book behind. It changes the world to be an interesting, connected questioner. Yeah.
That's awesome and just so inspirational. Do you have anything else you want to add, just about book bans or about your books in general?
Well, book bans are stupid. Let's see here. I guess not. I guess I could probably give you a couple of good book suggestions if you want, just based on books I have sitting around my desk if you want, because I've been reading some interesting books lately. I just finished this, The Beekeeper's Apprentice. It is fantastic book. There's Sherlock Holmes. It's a sort of fantastically interesting, intricate feminist addition to the Arthur Conan Doyle oeuvre. This is one I haven't started yet, but I've had on my shelves forever, and it's up next, is Michael Chabon, The Final Solution, a story of detection. I'm into detection right now. I'm considering writing a mystery, and so all these things keep popping up. There's this one that I'm about halfway through, Miko Kawakami, Breasts and Eggs, a novel. Absolutely phenomenal and weird and wonderful. And one more that I just happen to have here is The Department of Speculation, which I'm about halfway through as well. It was one of the 10 best books of the year a few years ago. And I've been very into slim books. The book I'm working on right now is a very slim book. I like small books too. And read periodicals. I happen to have the New Yorker handy, but there's so much interesting, you know, long form articles. I think we read a lot of snippets now, a lot of little short things, and it's good for the brain to sit with longer pieces. Novels are one form, but so is long form reporting, and even short stories, you know, can take you a half an hour or 30 minutes to get through. So well, I guess half hour is 30 minutes. So yeah, find lots of different things. Surround yourselves with as much as you can. It's and so you can just always have a few things going on at the same time.
Thank you so much for taking the time out of the day to talk with us. This was such an amazing conversation, and we're so happy to meet you.
Well, I'm so grateful that you asked, and I hope you'll all read many, many books this winter. It's nothing better than sitting in a warm space, hopefully with an animal beside you, and a stack of books and a cup of tea. That's what I will be doing. As much as I can in January is reading just as many books as I can get my hands on. So I hope you all will get that chance too. And I really appreciate you reaching out to me. Please stay in touch and let me know how else I can share on your group. And thank you for the work you're doing.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
My pleasure.
Bye-bye.
Okay. Bye all.
Bye.
Happy New Year.
Bye.